The top priority for the Montreal Canadiens is no doubt they have to build a second line, and it was a great season for them. They arrived earlier than maybe they or a lot of other people expected as far as the playoff picture, but now how do they keep that going? How do they make that sustainable? Well, they're going to have to build a second line because you can't just rely on one line and a hot shooting percentage to get you there year after year. And at some point, the second line is going to be stabilized. Michael Hage, the player they drafted in the first round last year, was a standout at the University of Michigan. He's a right-handed centerman. He's going to be there. But in the meantime, what do you do to give Patrick Laine and Ivan Demidov a chance to be productive players this season? You have to find a way to bring in a centerman. And the reality is they tried Kirby Dach last year, and at times it looked good. At times it looked like a player who was coming off ACL surgery. For Alex Newhook, probably better suited playing in a third line role, either on the wing or at the center ice position. So there is a void there. What are your two options? Well, unrestricted free agency or the trade route. And for me, if you're going to go with unrestricted free agency, your options are limited and your options are placeholders for when your young player Michael Hage is able to take the jump. And the reason why it's short-term solutions in the free agent market is because who's available for the Montreal Canadiens? If Sam Bennett goes back to Florida, if John Tavares decides to go back to Toronto, if Matt Duchene, we already know, is back with the Dallas Stars, your options become limited. So much so that now you look at a player like, is it Pius Suter, formerly of the Vancouver Canucks? Does he sign back in Vancouver? He's a guy who could make $4.75 million. He's a good player, but he doesn't exactly scream long-term solution as your second line center. Where they could really make up the most ground in this situation is the trade route, because Montreal has done a great job of accumulating draft picks and prospects that they could parlay into a significant player who could be a solution for them at the center ice position on the second line. And in a perfect world, it would be a left-handed centerman. And I look at a couple guys that make some sense. From the New York Islanders, Bo Horvat. A big, sturdy, left-handed shot, a guy who's good in the face-off circle, and a guy who would look really good playing under Nick Suzuki. A player who's a little bit different, maybe not the stature of type of player that you want, is Marco Rossi of the Minnesota Wild. The only issue there is now you're building a small center ice position up and down the lineup where, Nick Suzuki is a great player, but he's not the biggest guy. Marco Rossi's certainly not the biggest guy, even though he plays big. You need to have some bigger bodies down the middle of the ice. That's why I would favor Horvat in this situation. The one that I find really intriguing is, because there's so many great prospects and a ton of picks, could you ever pry Sidney Crosby? If there was one place he was going to go, other than the Pittsburgh Penguins, for me it would make the most sense to be the Montreal Canadiens. Not Colorado, not New York. Like, what are the connections to any of those other teams? But there's a connection to the Montreal Canadiens. He grew up loving that team, and if he was going to do anything on his way out, maybe it would be to live out a childhood dream. Not saying it's going to happen, but hey, we can all think about it. So for the Montreal Canadiens, we know the mission as far as this summer's project. It's to build a second line, and more likely than not, the way that they can do it with the most significance is going to be the trade route because of the prospects and the picks that they have built up in their pool.